All right, good afternoon, we're back. I hope you have dined sufficiently. Once again, I'd like to thank our culinary staff. You didn't even know we had one, right? And I certainly want to shout out our hospitality team. What a team, right? One of the things I'm hearing around the campus is that the hospitality is first class. When you get a chance, if you see somebody in the hospitality team, just thank them personally and let them know they're doing a great job. I appreciate that. Well, we're ready for the afternoon session, and I think you see the themes and the way they're emerging. Tomorrow, we're going to look for some feedback from you and our online audience to tell us what has come up for you in our time together, and maybe, also tell us what we can do better, differently, and how we can enrich this experience, because we think we're on to something. How about you? So we're excited about this particular session today. It's going to be in the spirit of what we've been doing in the afternoons. We're going to actually convene the community to have a conversation, but the conversation today is really about restoring recovery and healing. And so I'm grateful we've had two of our participants have already been with us this week, and we're adding another one who will also be with us tomorrow. Would you help me right now to welcome to this session Ashley Ellis, Ashley Thomas, and Dr. Daniel Black.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if I get this right. Oh, there we go. Okay. In thinking about this notion of restoring and healing, I thought about something that I'm going to pose to these magnificent scholars, these great ladies here, that I think is extremely important for us as Black people in America to think through, and to really potentially do some real healing around. And, I'm a 30-year professor at Clark Atlanta University. And And I keep noticing a trend as students come to school every year. And this is something I want to see if we can do something about. And that is, I think, when we think about our youth and we talk sometimes about reclaiming our youth and helping the youth, et cetera, I think we're starting in the wrong place. Because I think it's a poor farmer who blames a seed for a bad harvest. Right? I don't think you blame the seed. I think you hold the farmer accountable. Right? And there are ways we keep wondering what happened to our children instead of us wondering what we did to them, right? But I want to start it this way, and that is, I really think I have come to believe, Brother Ronnie, that part of the struggle with Black children is that their parents are not proud of themselves. I think most of us are not proud of ourselves. And the way you know is we keep sending our children to other people as their examples, right? And we keep telling our children how we dream of them having a life better than ours, right? So we're always juxtaposing our children's future against who we are, right? So there's some kind of way that we're constantly telling kids, I'm trying to figure out how you cannot be like me, right? If I'm not supposed to be like you, of course, what the question is going to become for any child is, then who? Who am I supposed to emulate? And we never say that part. But the question becomes, who are we sending our children to follow? Who are we sending them to follow? Because very, very few black parents tell a child, I pray that you become like me. Almost none of us heard that. But if we didn't hear that, right, then I keep wondering, where are we sending our children for their models, for their examples, right? I remember as a kid, my father said things to me, I remember it so well, like, I pray that you don't have to work as hard as I worked. That was an error, though, to say. He should never have said that. What Daddy should have said is, if you work half as hard as I've worked, you'll be excellent. But Daddy didn't think he was excellent. That was the problem, right? I remember Daddy saying things like, one day when you grow up and get your own house and get your own, Daddy dreamed of things for me, right, that Daddy never had, as if his lack of having them was a personal indictment of him, right? What do y'all think of this, ladies?
I mean, well, first of all, so much is already being remapped and restored already. Because you took me back to, I was raised by my grandparents and some of the things that I heard. But what this is bringing me to is the fact that when I'm thinking about my grandmothers, that when I'm thinking about the village that raised me collectively, and I think about what they were modeling, I believe that they did have a wherewithal or a sense of well-being, a reasonable sense of what it meant to be well for them. Yet at the same time, how do I demonstrate that in a fragmented body? How do I demonstrate that in a world that is preconditioned and socialized me to show up and to represent myself in one way in order to be accepted in particular positions or in particular jobs? So I believe that there was some discongruence with what they were modeling and what I was taught. And so that's kind of where I want to start, with a lack of acknowledgement of just who they were, and knowing that who they were was sufficient enough. That who they were was sufficient enough to raise this young black girl, to provide for all of her needs, to be able to give her back over to a community that would begin to see her into greater existence, that would begin to hear her into greater existence, and realizing that they within and of themselves might not have done it all, but they gave me over to a community that was able to raise me up in such a way that I know who I am. So I want to stop there.
But, I want to push back against that just a little, right? Because that's what we came to New York here to do, right? And that is not sufficient. You were raised by a grandmother who was excellent. Yeah. See, why can't we call a flawed thing excellent? Yes. Why do we keep looking for the lack of flaws? Why can't we be wounded and still win? You can be wounded and whole. Absolutely. If not, we're always reminding ourselves how listen, we got to be able to be traumatized and triumphant. That's got to be possible. Or either we're constantly reminding ourselves, we're constantly renegotiating, right, with what's wrong with black people. And what I'm trying to suggest is, again, after 30 years of teaching at Clark and grading papers into in midnight hour, and teaching 1 million students, right, in my head, to look at a young person and to say, I really hope, my prayer is that you have a better life than me. Something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Something's wrong with that.
Well.
Something's wrong with that.
Okay. So let me situate myself. So my name is Ashley Ellis. A lot of folks don't know the difference. They just see two Ashleys. But I'm Ashley Shanice Ellis. I am the daughter of Lizzie Jenkins and the late Bailey George Ellis Sr.
I say.
I was born and raised on the west side of Chicago, 2911 West Harrison, and I think location matters. one of the things that my mother always reiterated to me as I was growing up, because she was a woman who didn't have the chance to be mothered for a long time because she lost her mother right before her 10th birthday. But one of the things that she said to me, because my mother had, she was situated in her faith because that was her survival. And so she would always tell me, when you were born and came into this world, I had to give you back to God. Right? And so I think part of what I grew up understanding was that she understood that the responsibility that she had to steward and nurture me in the world was greater than her. And she knew that she would have to imagine something different for me than what she had the capacity to experience for herself. And I often think that, did she think that she was lacking, or did she understand really early her sacrifice, right? So my mother worked 30 years at the post office to ensure that we had what we needed, and not just us, but the community and a family. You know, the house she got kicked out in at 16 became a crack house. She went back and bought it, right? We talk about recovery and restoring, right? And she raised us in it. And not only did she raise us in it, but she raised us to see the people around us as assets, right? And so one of the things that, you know, she wanted me to see more than her. And also, what I didn't realize is that because of who she was and how I saw her, the very things that she wanted to become in the world that she did not have the opportunity to be, I began to inherit that in me. And so oftentimes now my mother looks at me, and it's not to say that, you know, I wanted you to have a better life, but she gets to look at me and say, everything that I wanted to be, you became. And she didn't put that on me. It wasn't a responsibility to become that. But because I watched who she was in community, and because she also envisioned something different for me, and I think that that is the work that we're talking about, right? Being able to see into a future. And I think that that was the gift that she was like, there are some things that, you know, because life happened, I am still well, I am good, and also there is something else that is for you to experience that I cannot experience. And my hope and prayer is that you get to experience that, you know, and so I'm grateful for the ways that my mother used to read books about places she didn't go or could never travel, but she introduced them to me and said, but you go. Right, and I think that that was part of her sacrifice, and I honor her for that. And again, I don't situate that as a lack or her telling me to work to be better. But I think that even without telling me, she was dreaming and imagining something different from me that I ultimately got to live into because she had the ability to dream and imagine something different.
Once again, I want to push a little,
that's fine.
Right? Let me just say, certainly, I honor what you're saying, absolutely. There are ways, even in our language, there are ways that without us knowing it, there are ways that we keep believing that we're beating our ancestors. Right, but that's not what you're saying, right? Follow me. What I mean is, and they're inviting us to do it, right? And what I'm suggesting to you is that it's going to be hard for you to be anything your mother wasn't, right? But I'm not sure we conceive it this way, right? Like, I have a PhD, right? My father never finished high school, right? The notion that I've done better than my father is the most egregious lie. I did not do better than Daddy, though Daddy and the rest of the world told me I did, right? I did not. And here's how you know. How in the world does a son go and get a PhD if the farmer didn't plant that? right? Daddy had the PhD. This world just didn't call it that. And so I'm begging us, right, to reorient, to restoring, right? I'm begging us to restore. So when we tell this story, we don't tell this story of no poor farmer whose son, no, then we missed it. Then we missed it, right? We missed it. It's like Jesus' son walking on water and talking about, Daddy told me to be better than him. Yeah. What? But you got to first understand how and when Jesus walked on water. If somebody missed that, Jesus could look ordinary.
And I think that that's what I'm getting at, right? Because I saw my mother model who she wanted to be. She had a particular vision for how that gift and medicine was to manifest in the world. So she wanted to be a teacher, an educator.
And right? She was.
But this is what I'm saying, though, right? Is that I saw her.
Right.
I saw her be a teacher. So when my friends didn't have places to go, it was our home that they came to, right? When the drug dealers and all the people would come sit on the porch. Right. It was my mother who was pouring in, and so she didn't have even to this day, I have to convince her, you've always been a teacher. Right. And so she had the medicine. My mother was a seer before I knew what it was. So when I show up in my work, I show up in my work because she was a model for what it was. Right. And so I'm not saying that I'm better than her. Right?
Of course.
I'm saying that she had a vision and she had the imagination to say that this is my medicine. This is my gift. This is how I want to see it in the world this way.
Right.
And although she lived it in her way, her imagination made it possible for me to be in that medicine, right, in a different way.
Sure.
And so I think that, like, I'm honoring what you're saying.
Yes. And really, I'm talking more to your mother than to you.
And I always, and this, so when we talk about recovery and restoring, is that, and healing young people, is that it took for me to understand. It took for me to be able to see my mother in her divinity, in her essence.
Absolutely.
And to help her remember.
Right. And that's and therein is the part I'm saying. Because I'm saying I want us to get to a place where the elders tell us that as children. Not we have to put it together. Where the elders, are proud of themselves.
Yeah.
So that the elder's sight leads our sight. Instead of us having to come behind the elder, and help the elder know who the elder is. Right? Yeah. And so there are ways I'm saying I want the elders to be able to hold their heads high and proud, right? In fact, I love your story about Mama buying the that's magnificent. Right? Anybody who can do that, right? The notion of your daughter becoming a doctor is logical to me. Right? And really what I'm saying is I want us to stop thinking of those things as extraordinary. Not you. I'm talking to the elders because again, I'm trying to get us to stop looking at the seed. Right? And to look at the planter. Because there are ways in which what we're getting is simply the harvest we've planted. But we're working so hard. Like I said, most of us come from folks, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, mama work, right? Then if somebody's working like that, and as you said, this level of sacrifice, why in the world isn't a guarantee that all the children are going to do marvelously? The children are going to, do you see how these people are working? Then what child would not look at that and honor that? Most children, because you cannot sacrifice and kill yourself working to set somebody else's ease up while you're calling your work, less than holy, less than divine. See, it's got to be, I need you to work just like I did. Like if I got 10 pair of shoes, but mama only had 2, I would have done better with 2. But the ability to give me 2, my folks thought, was helping me, because then you won't have to be ashamed of only having 2 pair of shoes. But somehow those 2 pair of shoes made these other people walk further. And I want them to claim those 2 pair of shoes as holy and divine, and that's the model. Because we're getting more and more and more things, but we're not getting more and more and more character.
I guess I'm still pushing.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm here.
Because the word that comes for me is grace. I think that there's a yes and in it, right? That not only do they try to do the best they can with what they know, we do the best we can with what we know, but we're also talking about the inheritance of that conditioning. Right? And so, and I think that the part of the responsibility is that, right, when we talk about that, the 7 generations of healing, right, is forward and backwards. That means that there are some things that my mother did break through, right? That she did, that she figured out, right? That she saw in the spirit and said, that cannot be the story any longer for me or my children. And there were some things that she could not break free of. And it was passed on to me. And so my work then became, right, to become free in that. But for me, for my mother to give it, she had to see me in it, right? And to bear, the same way I bear witness to her for my healing, she got to be able to look forward and see me in my healing for things that she didn't even know. Right, she didn't even know, like, some of the things that she was passing down were harmful. Right. She didn't. She literally did. There are conversations that I had with my mother, and also because she lived through a time. Right. We talk about healing. A lot of people. My mother was born in 1960. My father was born in 1952 in Selma, Alabama. She was born in Jackson, Mississippi. So, like, we're talking about the things that they've survived, the horrors that they have survived. And one of the things that I recognize is they were part of a generation that got either complicit or did not have the spaces to encounter their own healing. So they stopped sharing these stories about, right, how they survived, how they got over, how they got to this point. And so I think that, like, I've had to give them grace for what they didn't know for themselves and what they didn't know to give to me. And I've had to learn how to restore what they did give to me for not only my healing, but for their healing, my grandmama healing, and for my kids' healing, right? And so I think that for me, like, what's coming up is, yes, I think that they probably wanted to do those things. And for some of that, they did do them. But in all the areas, like, they were still struggling. Right? They were still trying to figure out. My mother was proud that she sent these kids into the world, that she was proud and she knew. And also, she took a hell of an ass whooping for a very long time. Right? She developed a heart condition for the way in which she had to encounter the world. And when all the pieces fell, she found herself alone, right? Questioning, right, how she had got here, questioning her excellence, questioning, did I do a good job, right? And that is the trauma, because she didn't have the spaces to go and get healing, right? But her hope came because she was able to see what became possible for her kids and her grandkids. And so that's why I'm saying this. I feel like it's a yes and it has to be some grace. And I think that I had to develop the capacity to see her, to know that what she gave me, and to restore what she gave me, to trust that, you were doing that for me to be well. But the way you gave it to me was the only way that you knew how. She didn't know another way.
I want to jump in just here. I mean, one, because I'm a different kind of processor. So as you all are talking, much is also being processed in me. And so I'm thinking about, because the conversation is about healing and recovery, and how do we get back to the elders being able to claim their wholeness. And I do believe that comes through who is seeing them, who is acknowledging them, or who they are being acknowledged by. right? And I even think about myself, like who was I seen by and who was I acknowledged by? And if I was acknowledged by they who were overly functioning and overly working, then that is what I begin to not just inherit, but I begin to see those things and praise those things in me. So it really causes me to go back and really wonder who saw my grandparents, who truly saw them at the soul level, at the spirit level, that could be able to call them forth into a more wholer existence, right? Into a space of coherence within themselves that they could then go out and behold. When you said, who are we sending our children to? That question is packed. Because I'm not sure that we are sending, even when I think about the school system and where I'm situated in the school system, I do the work and engage in the work of teacher wellness and teacher well-being and trying to really create initiatives and programming to support their wholeness on a daily basis. But when I think about who we're sending our children to, we're sending them to unwhole, unwell, folk that don't really see themselves, folk that haven't really come into the fullness of who they are and who they be, folk who are still trying to figure it out. And so now I have more questions. I mean, I think this conversation is causing me to really, when do we get to the point of restoring? And I understand that that's a part of the process, but I really do believe that it's about proper acknowledgement and proper sight and who's seeing you and who's beholding you. And if I can be honest, when Elder Bishop was on the stage today, so much was being remapped in me in this moment that now I have a different understanding of who I am. I recognize that I'm not just a teacher, but I am a host of a healer who has come to mediate healing in the inner worlds of a being, right? To support those that are seeking inner harmony within themselves. And if I am a host of it took today for me to be here to be able to come into agreement with the voices of they who already saw me before I got to this moment. So I think that as we talk about the healing and recovery, agreement, acknowledgement is important. But then what do I come into agreement with about what has been seen or about what I see as other people are seeing me into greater existence?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I'm appreciating this on many, many, many levels. Because ultimately what I'm certainly suggesting here is something very, very, very revolutionary. I think it is, anyway, and that is the ability for what we've sometimes thought of as people who did, even the phrase, which I've used a million times, the best they could with what they had. I'm not sure we need to keep using that phrase. Right, because I feel a subtle insult in the statement, but I've said it a million times, right? So I'm gonna castigate myself here, because that seems to suggest that somebody was deficient from the start, but they worked their deficiency, right? But I think the whole thing is flawed. Let me tell you an experiment I did maybe a year or so ago. I have a friend who teaches at Emory University. And I went to her and I said, she has 3 kids. I said, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever told your children, right, what you dream for them? Have you ever told your children of the life that you want for them, that you want them to have a life, right, that far exceeds your own? And her answer absolutely devastated me, this white woman, right? She said, I have to be very honest with you. I would never think to say that. Why would I think to say that? And I said, well, because, you want something great for your kids. She said, but I want it for me too. There's nothing I want for them that I don't want for me. I said, she said, there's nothing I want for them that I don't want for me. And I can think of 10 things my parents wanted for me that they didn't want for themselves, right? But also, I think it's around the way we've conceived, right? That having come enslaved, right? We start deficient, right? But maybe there is the possibility that our grandeur and our greatness is also in the bondage. That our brilliance That the bondage did not hinder the brilliance. Right? That in fact, possibly, just possibly, that even starting with the middle passage, which I write about, that maybe, actually, physical bondage set the stage for the birthing of an imagination and a brilliance that even continental Africans never knew. Right? Sure, there was a trauma with it. We got that. Absolutely. Absolutely. But it seems to me that the people who were weaving kente cloth, right, are the same people who were piecing quilts. It's the same thrust. But if we're not careful, folks have not necessarily always seen the quilt, right, as culturally achieved as the kente cloth. Right? As if we're not very, very careful, right? Such that then there's always a way that we look at ourselves here as always becoming, right? As always on the way, right? And I just wonder what would happen to a set of black children. No, let me say it another way. When I think in my head of Nat Turner, right? What I think was so brilliant about Nat Turner is Nat Turner agreed to die before he ever did the rebellion. Right? I'm going to die. This is going to cost me that. Right? And Nat Turner, and what he said, I got that. Right? In other words, Nat Turner laid down his life, right, for a people. But we don't call him Christ. We don't call him Christ. Then somewhere we're missing it. Somewhere we're missing it. Not to call that man Christ, and that man agreed to die. Right? Of course he knew it. Of course, but we have a whole pantheon of elders that way. Yeah. You know what I mean? When I think of Harriet Tubman running back and forth to freedom, right? But Harriet Tubman never knew her daddy. She couldn't tell you her daddy's name. But what got to do with running? Like, I got to do this running because I got to get my people where my people going. And I'm saying that sometimes I think we limit our imagination to our perceived circumstances. Right? And sometimes I think that makes us not really behold the full expanse sometimes of the grandeur of our elders, because sometimes our elders make it seem so ordinary. Right? And then speak to us that, it can make us, if we're not very careful, believe that external achievements is really the way we say thank you to our elders and ancestors. Right? It can make us believe that instead of the way we adore each other as being the ashe. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that I spend a lifetime acquiring things. I spend a lifetime, right? Because all the things I acquire shows the sign, right, that mama and daddy did well. Right? When really I think it's the wrong signs. I think it's the wrong signs. I think the way I honor you as my sister, I think the ability for me to be as excited about your child as you are, right? I think that's what Harriet Tubman was running for, right? Because I don't think she was dreaming of us going to Princeton. No. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that. I don't think Frederick Douglass did that for the hope that we go to Wall Street. I just don't believe it. It's got to be something. It's got to be something internal, right? That's peculiar to us, right? And I think it's invisible.
It is.
Right? Because I think everything black people honor is intangible.
Yeah.
Right? But I think we've turned the tangibility, right? It makes me think of the Clark sisters. I'm looking for a miracle, right? I expect the impossible. I feel the intangible, right? Because I think our ancestors were smart enough to know that if you can't take it to God, it ain't no good. Right? And I think if we teach our children this, I think there are ways. I was arguing with my brother the other day. I said, if I were you, I'd take the TV out of the kids' room. He was like, well, no. I mean, man, they go in there and I get to watch my football. I said, if I were you, I'd take the TV out of the kids' room, right? 2 or 3 pair of pants, a couple of pair of shirts. Now, we wasn't going to like this, right? And no kid is going to like it either, right? But part of what I think not the child, part of what I think he is avoiding is if you strip them of that materiality, right, they'll have to come before you.
Yeah.
Now, that won't work to get them away from you, right? It won't work. You'll have to. They'll now come and start bothering and bugging you, right? A couple of years ago, I was at his house for Thanksgiving, and his kids were young. And for Christmas, I went out and I spent $5. I went out and I got a box. This is really true. I got a cardboard box. I taped it up with duct tape, right? It was this big box. And on Christmas morning, we got up, right? And they said, Uncle Baba, what you get us? I said, it's in the box, right? So they got in the box and I closed it up, right? I closed the box up and I tumbled it around and they were screaming and hollering, right? And I pushed the box, right, with sweat, right? And after an hour, they were tired and I was tired. I said, Merry Christmas. But here's what's deep. What's deep is to this day, they keep asking me, are you bringing another box? Because what they really want is your time. What they really want is your attention. What they really want is your affirmation. What they really want is to believe that they are worth you being bothered with them. Right? And for all of them, I have college funds. They don't know nothing about that. I'm just putting it aside. If they don't go to college, it's my money. No problem. No problem. But I'm saying this because, and of course we're saying complimentary things, certainly. I'm saying this because I think there's a way in which we often have spent a lifetime dreaming of what we could do, right, to set our kids up, right? And I'm not sure it's doing what we necessarily thinking it's doing, not because the kids don't succeed, but because mama and daddy don't get set up.
Yeah. But I think you have so I work with young people in schools and in communities. My entry point with young people was through the juvenile justice system. The first time I ever I used to play basketball. I used to think that I would go be in the WNBA somewhere, come back, turn a profit in the hood and do something for young people. But I always had a call to be with young people. And in school one year, my first year, I needed an extra credit to stay, to keep this little money they gave me. And so I took a course called Juvenile Violence. Because I was very interested. I grew up 5 minutes away from one of the first juvenile detention centers in Cook County, and one of the largest. And what I saw was this rotating effect of young people going in and out. And I didn't have language for it, but I knew that there was something that was happening where my homies would go to jail, they come back, and they back in the same spot, right? Oh, you just gonna come out and you gonna keep selling drugs, bro. That's what okay. But I had a curiosity And so during this juvenile violence seminar, what we didn't know and what the professor told us, he said, you know, I want y'all to come early in the morning and we're going to go somewhere. And he set us up, but he didn't tell us where we were going. And so when we pull up the next day, we're at a maximum security juvenile detention center, prison. And for me, I was like, wait, places like this exist. And so when we go into it, he said, you'll have no security. These young people, some of them be in cuffs, some of them won't. And we just walk in the yard. And you seeing babies, 9 and 10 in handcuffs, right? And the lights snatched out of their eyes. And so as we enter into this facility, the lady asks, oh, do you want to see our shoe? And I was like, the shit, ain't no way they got a solitary confinement unit for young people. And so we go into this unit, and initially I think that it's empty. Because it's gotta be, it's about the width of a hallway, but it's 2 doors on each side, about maybe 10 on each side, and they go all the way down. And so I go in first. I'm the only black person and the only black woman on this trip. So I said, I'm gonna go in first. And as I go in, every set of doors I walk past, a young person's face appear. And I was like, is this something spiritual happened? Until I get to the end and I realize these are real bodies that I'm looking at. And we began to hear the stories about how young people, when they were being released from the juvenile detention center, parents didn't come pick them up. Right? That some of them, because they didn't have community or places to go, that when they got off the train, right, they would do something to be arrested, to go back, because that was the safe haven. And so one of the things that I began to understand is that they were coming from places where parents, I have had conversation with parents who didn't know. They didn't. You have access to a knowing. I was working with young people on juvenile probation, right? And I sit with parents who don't know themselves, who don't know to think, dream, or imagine for themselves and nobody else. Not even the kids. They can't even tell them, I want you to do better. Right? We surviving alongside one another. And so when I think about when you opened up with the seed, right? It is not the seed. And sometimes it's not the farmer. It's the soil. Right? And we have to look at, I think Reclaiming the Village is about looking at all of our responsibilities today. And have it within their capacity, right, to do or be what you're expecting or what we're trying to set up. That's the reality, right? That so many parents just don't know yet. They don't know, and they don't have the access. They don't have the places, right? Today, one of my young people walked into this church. She's 19. She said, it's the first time I ever been inside of a church. And that's not a lack or anything to her family. She said, this is the first time I've been inside of a church. So some people don't even have access to the spaces that teach you to imagine or dream or think about and lean into something that is bigger than you. And so what is the role of the community in the recovery and healing of our young people, right? That like when the farmer can't, right? I've planted seeds before, right? I'm still trying to get my green thumb on. I'm trying to recover and stuff like that, right? I just snipped some, I clipped my plant. I was like, ooh, I was real excited for it, right? But then I realized that I may not have planted this the correct way. But what I then lean into is my community to say, well, how do I repot this? Did I use the right soil? Does it have the nutrients that it needs? It takes more than my eyes to see what is happening with this seed. And so while, again, I think that when you say, who is seeing our grandparents, who is seeing the parents? When we used to do this work, when we are doing this work with young people, we had to recognize that, like, oh, we can't just do the work with young people without shifting the conditions that are happening at home, at school, without addressing the conditions that's happening on the block. Because there were some things that my mother said to me, she poured into me. She believed in me, she loved me, right. She was proud of me, and also I had to go into a world that didn't. And some of her reinforcement wasn't enough. And I had to lean into a bigger sense of community. I had to meet. I didn't. It was so much that I didn't know and that I'm still learning. And so even when you say, like, I want us to stop using the language of they did the best they could with what they had, that's the only language I got access to right now until I meet you. Mm-hmm. To know that something else is different. You know, and so that's what I keep coming back to, that sense of grace that, like, because I might have to become that parent for my kid, right, that you're imagining, because the ones before me could not. My young people will become better parents, or those parents that we are imagining, because sometimes the parents we working with ain't there yet. And I keep saying yet, because I don't believe that they can't get there. I just think that they don't always have spaces to know that there's another possibility yet.
And this is how we get there. I mean, this is how we get there. Because, you know, when I think about you as a parent, right, of course you're going to be an excellent parent, right? You will be excellent, right? I have no doubt of that whatsoever. 10 years from now, right, and you got a child coming, right? 10 years from now, right, if a child says she did the best she could with what she had, right, I'm going to correct that child.
And I'll correct it too, because I know now.
That's the thing.
I know now.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
But it's not until I'm in proximity with another possibility.
Right.
That I'm able to then do something different.
Right.
And a lot of our young people, they're parents, and they're in communities that are not in proximity to seeing another possibility.
That's right. And that's what we're modeling. Because here, I'm going to guess that I'm older than you.
Really?
I'm going to guess. Girl, listen. I'm going to get, well, what's beautiful here is, and who knew this was going to happen when we got up here on the stage, right? Right. What I'm praying is exactly what you're saying, and that is that I, as an elder, am modeling this, right? So that when we walk off this stage, we say, oh, yes, I get it. And you're right, and we have to do this everywhere we go. Yeah, because without this, eldership then is just theoretical. Right. And see, I want eldership to be very, very, very practical. And I need eldership to be a requirement in the black community. Because see, part of the problem, too, is too many grown people don't want to be elders.
No.
Right.
No.
And I really believe, now this is just my own position, I believe if a person is an adult and you're not an elder, you're a big kid.
But that's the reality.
It is.
Some folks are stuck at their 10-year-old
Absolutely.
self. They stuck at their point of when they first engaged with trauma, when somebody snatched something, we are engaging with grown adults in the schools.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
In the schools. Yes. Every day we go into the schools, we're supporting grown adults.
Absolutely.
Right? People be like, how, is it harder to work with young people, or is it harder to work with adults? And I'm always like, it's the adults. Because what we're trying to do is, if you've been doing this job for 30 years, we're trying to reach down beyond the muck and the mess and get to the root of what happened 30 years ago. Right? We have to uproot and we have to unpack that. And most people aren't willing to let it go.
It's true. No, it's true. It's true.
They're not willing to release it, because who am I without this story?
Yeah.
So many adults that we work alongside, credible messengers, they are praised for the story that keeps them where they at. And so when you take it away, they have to question, and then who am I?
Right.
And they don't have yet, right, yet the way to restoring.
That's right. And most people are equating parents with elders.
Yeah,
Right? And we need some elders who are not parents.
absolutely.
Right? I think that's critically. And we need to be clear who our parents' elders are.
Yeah.
Right? Because really, I think a healthy child is supposed to watch their parents be in submission to elders and to eldership. But I didn't see it.
No,
Yeah.
because for a lot of them, the crack era took so many elders or adults and parents, right? We had generations, grandmothers raising grandkids, and so some of them couldn't, right? We have to acknowledge the conditions in which our folks had to survive, right? So like there were real things that took them away from us.
Absolutely.
That we didn't have access to. I knew one of my grandparents growing up, and I yearned to be near elders and not just older folks.
Right.
But elders who I could sit. I desired it.
Absolutely.
But I had to look around
Absolutely.
at my community. I had to find a few that were there, but we also had to be honest about what the conditions of life had done and where it had left us.
Absolutely.
Right? Like so many of our giants were gone.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And there are so many giants here now, if we can see them.
And if they make themselves available.
Which is absolutely.
Because I know elders who some don't make it, right? They like, I'm tired.
Yes. It's like
Don't call me.
Yes.
Let me be.
Absolutely.
I've passed the baton. Go find the person I gave the baton to.
I've heard it.
Right?
Absolutely. I've heard it. Absolutely. I've heard that. I've absolutely heard that. You know, it's like when I look back now over my 30 years at Clark, the best thing I've ever did in my life was to go to Clark Atlanta University. Now, I haven't made any money really, right? I haven't made any money. But what I discovered is that's the American trick. Mm-hmm. The American trick is to buy out black excellence, right? So that instead of you going over here where black kids are and where black kids congregate, right, we'll pay you 3 times more, right, to come over here. And there are a few black kids here. Yeah. It's a few. But we're really buying out your influence.
Yeah.
Right? And the best thing I ever did was not to sell my influence. But also what I also had to do, that you're saying, and it is true, I also had to rearrange my consciousness so that I wasn't mad about getting paid half the money or a fraction of the money that I would have made somewhere else. See, I had to get out of that too, or either I was going to be at Clark and be pissed off, right? Yeah. So a committed elder who's mad about the cost ain't no good either.
Yeah. No.
You got to be committed, and you got to be clear that the negotiation, right, works in your favor, right? But the only way we can be clear about that is to believe that the human sacrifice, right, that the transformation of the children is the greatest pay conceivable, right? And you know, and when I go to Clark every day now, it's just the grandest thing to walk across campus, and it takes me 45 minutes to get to my office, right? But now I'm hearing ancestors say, that's the pay, that's the pay, that's the pay, that's the pay. What I didn't understand then is the money comes too. The money comes too. But I was trying to figure out how to get a harvest before the planting.
Yeah.
Right? Because I believed I deserved it. Because hell, I went and got a PhD. That's where I messed it, right? Well, see, Daddy and them didn't have it, so I didn't really think they deserved it. They just worked hard. That's what they called it. I was supposed to get it. Right? Because I was the inheritor. Right? Incorrect. Incorrect. And what I see now is, and I had no idea how this was going to happen, right? I'm a writer, as most people know, right? I didn't know that in mentoring all these kids for all these years, that I was really grooming up my sales audience. I had no idea. Now I drop a book, and all over America, all over social media, black kids are like, this is my professor. This, buy this book, I just had no idea that it was going to happen that way, right? But I guess all I'm saying is my discovery for us as black folks and as elders is if you invest in and if you understand that the excellence you set before black kids, that is always the treasure, right? That's always the treasure. But we may have to trade out some materialism, right, in order to pull this off. But materialism was never really what they were running for anyway, right? But it has become the dream in so many ways, I think.
And I also think that I don't think that as community, I think that there's an assumption that we actually center children, and we don't.
Good. That's good.
Our churches don't. Our schools don't. Communities.
That's good.
Because a lot of times, I was having this conversation, I think, with somebody about if I'm sitting in darkness, in the wilderness, oftentimes our position as the church or as the school or whatever is to show up and cut the light on. Is to show up and try to ignite the light instead of being willing to sit in the wilderness with. And I think oftentimes what we miss is that we aren't willing to actually go get our young people outside of these doors, right? That we're willing to enter into their spaces, into their wilderness. And we because we don't really care. Like we want our future to be something better or whatever the case may be. But I have sat and watched young people struggling, doing whatever it is, and the same adults that claim like our children are the future won't intervene. They won't encourage. They talk down. They won't share the medicine. Right? And so many of our young people, and again, I think that there's an assumption that we center our children, and a lot of times it's a mask. We don't. And that is why if we're really talking about, right, like the recovery and healing of young people, of our youth, of our children, we really have to recenter them in our lives, right? When I think about, there's a reading we usually do in our restorative justice circles, and it talks about how this African tribe, when they greet each other with this language of Keserian and Gera. And the greeting, when I see you and I say it, means how are the children? Because the well-being of the children determine the well-being of the community, right? And if we're honest about the well-being of the children as a reflection of what is showing up in community, then what is really telling us is that they aren't well and we damn sure ain't well. And because we're not really invested outside of talk, I'm in the trenches with these young people, and I'm on the stages with the people who want to talk about it, not y'all. Right? I'm in the rooms with the teachers who imagine that, like, I am for young people, and I sit and I can hear that, oh, you show up to this job every day because this is about you. This is about your ego. This is about you thinking you saving somebody. This is about you getting to the next level in your work, in your it's not about the young people. Nobody's sitting on the floor with young people and saying, but what do you want? What are you dreaming about? What do you imagine? What are you struggling with? We keep coming up with the answers from our perspective, but we ain't on the floor with young people. We ain't in the trenches with them for real. Right? When my young people go off to jail, I got a young person right now sitting on Rikers, and he's been in this spin for years. And who shows up? Nobody. We pray for those in prison. We don't go to them. We pray for our kids in school. We don't show up at the school.
Yeah, I do, but
You do. No, but I'm saying the majority. But I think that, like, we have a different access.
Right.
And if the common person, right, that's not about the money. If the people in the pews aren't willing to, if you keep walking past the kid on the corner, right, what they say, if a kid don't feel the warmth of that community, they'll burn it down.
Right.
That's because we don't even want to speak to them on the corner. And so, like, what is our beyond the parents? I think about Sabonfu Somé when she talks about, she said growing up, she said she was raised in the community. She said it wasn't until she was like 11 that she recognized who her mother was, the one who gave birth to her, because there were so many people in community. We don't cultivate that kind of community. And so, like, when I think about recovery and healing, it cannot be on the young people to just engage in that for themselves. Sure. It can't just be on the parents. It has to be on all of us to reimagine and recenter young people and make them the priority of all that we do. They have to be the center. And I think that, like, if we aren't willing to reorient ourselves towards young people, then I think that we'll continue to perpetuate this cycle.
I'm just going to take a deep breath right here, because I'm also hearing that there are those of us that are in this room who do care. Of course. Right? Yeah. Right. Yet we have been taught to perform care.
Yes.
In a very different way, right? We've been taught to mediate care in a very different way. We've been taught to buy out care, right? To support our children and our youth in very different ways. But when I really think about the most transformative encounters that I've had with both teachers and students, it was me sitting with that child and me mediating and me listening. And there was an exchange between what they call for from me and what I was able to give back to them in reciprocity. So I do believe that we, as we're restoring and just looking at what does care really look like in our communities? Like, what does that really look like? What does it really look like for me to listen to the soul of another such that they raise up so high that they've reached another dimension and another reality that they themselves could not have even conceived, but something within them was awakened because I spoke to it, because I saw it, because I nurtured it. So what does that care look like? And even as we're talking about the elders, what would it take for us to really steel ourselves long enough to be able to acknowledge? We talked about acknowledgement. We talked about coming to agreement with whatever it is. But what would you offer to us today for us to be able to get into a space where we can, one, be at one with ourselves, but then how do we mediate that care? Like, what would we even begin as elders, being able to do that beyond just seeing and listening? What does that actually look like for elders that are in this room and elders that are in the classroom that are showing up and saying, I am, right? They do have this script that I am showing up and giving the best of what I am and the best of who I am, right? But how do we do that in such a way that my very existence would call forth another being without me saying anything?
I think the first thing that we have to do is touch our children. I don't mean whip. Right? I don't necessarily mean scold. I mean, what does it mean to a child, right? Even whether teacher, mentor, doesn't make any difference, right? It's a very different thing when an elder says, good morning, right? And a child says, good morning. That's very different than, good morning. Hey. See, why are you chuckling? I'm asking you.
Yeah, because I feel the exchange of love. I feel the energy.
Absolutely.
And how do we do that in a way that, because I know in environments, and we're talking about schools and liability and all of that, and you're a male.
Absolutely. Some of it you still, hey, good morning. Yeah. Right? In other words, we can't lead a revolution that's risk-free. Right?
Yeah.
The risk is in the revolution. Right? You got to, if we're going to submit to everything the society holds up for us in terms of what saying can be done and cannot be done, right? It's already a done deal, right? In fact, black life in America is the risk, right? So we got to do the risk. But what is it? And I'm going to tell you something that, y'all probably wouldn't. But as a boy, the first time I held a grown man's hand, I was definitely in my 30s. The first time. Now, many men had corrected me and, and what's up? Boy? They did all of that. I didn't even slip hard, right? Right? But the notion of touching me because I was precious to them and was valued, like holding my hand because I was wonderful, that never happened. At Clark, I do this, and the kids are lined up outside my office. I literally, some days I'm like, I just can't go in today. I just can't do it. Because I know it's 40 people, and I really need to grade these papers, right? But what I realize is our children are touch deprived, right? They're touch deprived. And you can speak life, right? And shift their very consciousness, right? By the extent to which, even in churches, right? If all the touching of Jesus we do, touch the kids too, and even the notion of the way you own children as your own. See, I believe that if a person is grown and you don't claim any children, you're immature. You're immature. And children everywhere, and people say, well, I don't have any kids. You're immature. You don't see that child over there? Grab him. Right? I've lived in a house for 30 years, and I do not believe there have been 6 months where I've lived in there by myself. I don't think it's been 6. I don't think it's been. Sometimes it's 7, 8 kids. I have literally awakened, and there was kids all on the floor in the house. I don't know how they got in the house. This is really true, really true. But I've told kids, if you need something, come. Right? So I think the touch, and it can seem simple, but it's not. We don't touch each other nearly as much. Now, as adults, we don't touch each other either. Right? This is a very, very serious thing. Most adults, especially like men and women, oh no, you can't do that because, I'm married. Well, brother, if you're heteronormative, he is too. So ain't no fear. Hold that man's hand. I don't know that I've ever seen 2 50-year-old men holding hands who weren't gay. I don't know I've ever seen it. But something's wrong with that in a village. Because metaphorically, that's the bridge. And if a child doesn't have a bridge, right, we can never bring them over. So the touch, I think, is critical. The second thing is, I think we have to sing each other's praises, even if it's hyperbolic. Right? I want to urge us to begin to say to each other what we say to God. That's just the way we roll. So that when I see Ronnie, I say, Prince of Peace, good morning, right? Or to say, your name is to be lifted above every other name. At the name of Ronnie, I bow. Why? Because then it's going to be hard for him to dishonor me. Because I've spoken his divinity. Right? That's different than what's up. Right? We trying to call something forth. You know what I mean? It's very different to say my queen. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. No. But I do think it's powerful to say, I magnify you, Ashley. I exalt you. I lift your name on high, my sister. Right? And we need it worse than God. So I think our language to one another has to be intentional, right? And has to be conscious. And I think if our children heard us saying those kinds of things, right, it's going to be hard to be trifling. That's going to be rough. But if we can talk to each other, and if our music can say whatever and call us whatever and whatever, and then all of a sudden we're looking for character out of children, we're a contradiction. That's not going to work. Oh, was our time?
I lost track of the time.
We did too, I think.
This has been one of the most engaging conversations. Wow. I'm taking cues from sound. We're going to get some microphones in the aisle. Maybe you have a question. This is an Mbongi, so it necessitates us all participating. So maybe you have a question, a comment. If you line up in the aisles, we'll get that to you right away. While we're waiting, Ashley Ellis, Minister Ashley Ellis, would you please, is it doctor?
Y'all keep putting these titles on me.
Let's call it forth, sister.
Calling it forth. Right?
Most High? No. Can you, while we're setting up the microphones, can you say something about the next session to which we want to invite people to across the street in the Life Center? Because it dovetails from this presentation into the practical.
Yes. So I'm part of the Breathe Collective. I'm a co-founder and co-keeper. To breathe means to be balanced, restored, empowered, affirmed, transformed, healed, and embodied. And last year we piloted a fellowship called the Peacekeepers, co-creating space for young people to be weapons of mass construction, weapons of mass love, peacemakers and community builders. And they've done the inner work, and they're now doing the outer work in community. And so they are co-creating a circle in the theme of restoring the I am. It is to center young people, but I know we don't have a lot of young folks in this space. But if you would like to experience how we build space through peacemaking circles as a practice, then you're welcome to join us and participate. It is not something that we sit down and talk to. We in the work. We doing it together. And so they'll be co-leading that space with us. And so you're welcome to join us. And it could be a way that you take back and, do things with your young people if you so choose. But
3:30 in the Life Center. First question.
All right. First of all, thank you to each of our panelists for this discussion. It has been really, really good. My question deals with the whole issue of healing, but healing for Black and brown communities in the face of continuing injury over and over and over again. Before you can heal from one thing, before you can get over a Breonna Taylor, it's a George Floyd. Before it's a George Floyd, it's on and on and on. So my question to you is, as a panel, what do we do as a community to heal ourselves in the face of these kinds of injustices where, people are being shot in the backs, and then when you think that the legal system is going to come to your aid, they fail us. Nothing is ever done to our satisfaction for the lives of our people that are being snuffed out. And then for those of us who have younger kids coming up behind us, I have nieces and nephews, and I have to keep telling them, if you're stopped, put your hands on the steering wheel. This should not be. So how do we heal as a people when the injury is ongoing?
So one of the things that we believe is restoration and healing can't just be a response to harm. Dr. Fanya Davis talks about restorative justice as a proactive relational strategy. And so I think part of what we have to do is continue to build spaces and places for us to go to one, be in relationship with one another, because we can't heal in isolation. And two, to have safe space. So for our young people, while we were in South Africa this summer, and while we were in South Africa, right, they're getting all of this news that's happening in America. And one of my young people who's here, she's like, what do we do with this when we get back? Right? And it's like we can move into action. And also what they now have the tools to do is say, how do I go home and create space to process what's happening? And I think a lot of times we can't engage in healing because we don't know where to go to do it, first and foremost. And so I think for young people particularly, and we've seen this in the schools, like I've had young people, they wake up in the morning or they come in the night before, young people have got shot, and they come into school with that. Where do they go? Right? And so I think that being able to co-create and build places of healing where it can happen, where you can be seen, right? Where I can say sawubona, where I have a responsibility to you and you to me, so that we don't feel like we're alone. So I think one of the first things we have to continue to do is build the spaces and the containers for folks to know that, like, I can go there. Right? If I don't have insurance, I can't get to it there. And it don't have to be there, but like, I have a safe space to land. I have a safe space to go, to engage. Because sometimes we think also healing is this whole work, but sometimes it's like, I need a space to tell the story. I need a space to just say how I'm feeling. I've had young people legit in circles with us, and they're like, I'm so glad that I got to say that I got to share that. I thought I was the only one. And to just know that you're not the only one is healing in and of itself, And so I think for me, the way that we practice is by trying to co-create and co-build healing spaces in community for particularly young people to come to and know that they can be their most authentic self, that they can show up with the worst thing they've ever done or the worst thing that has ever happened to them and still be seen in the fullness of their divinity and their humanity.
That's good. That's good.
Amen. Linda?
Namaste. Thank you for this. I have two questions, but they're connected. The first thing I want to say, when you was talking about Dr. Black, elder requirement, one of the things that you said that elders who are not parents, who have never had biological children, can be an asset because we have medicine. I've been working with children and families for 36 years. I never heard that. So I wanted you to speak to that, and also in reference to the elders. Don't beat me up, seniors. When we talk about our parents, like our parents said they did the best that they could because they wanted us to be better, but we're successful because of how they modeled it. So what I'm thinking, and I wanted to get the panel's thoughts on that most youth programs, they don't have a lot of elder participation. How can we step to that? Because the elders are very important, I think, for these youth programs. Thank you.
I think two things. Yes, I think two things. I'm gonna answer the last question first. I think every classroom, every public classroom in public schools should be assigned an elder. I think all these elders in so many communities, right, who are at home, right, I think should be in a classroom, right? They don't have to have an assigned function. We have to pay them. Just put them in there, right? The magic will happen. Because an elder will start saying, pay attention, child. Right? Don't you hear that teacher talking? See, that kind of thing, right? But also children will get endeared to that parent. But also many children, their grandmother's 42. But what does it mean to interact with somebody who's 76, who's 82, and you're 7? See, I think that's a critical thing that desperately needs to happen, right? And I had the answer to your first question. Ask it to me again. Okay, yeah. I don't think I believe that because a person conceives a child, that you're actually the parent. Sometimes a body's job is to get the child here. Somebody else's job is to rear them, right? That's not always an error. Sometimes that's process. Sometimes it was supposed to happen that way. And this is important because if not, we'll think grandparents who raise kids that this is always plan B, right? When sometimes that's exactly the way that was supposed to go, right? It was supposed to go that way. And I'm saying this because there are a lot of people who don't have biological children, but the gift that the children down the street need is in their house. It's like having James Baldwin in your community. We don't need him. You don't mean that. You don't mean that. Audrey Laura lives in the community and we trying to figure out what she gonna do. What? And this is very, very, very important. In many ways, subconsciously, we've taken on this Eurocentric notion that if I'm the parent, I'm supposed to be the fullness of what my child needs. That really deprives a child, really, right? And what I'm saying here is sometimes we need to trade children, because I realize that Ronnie actually has what my son needs, that Ashley, right? But sometimes it's our ego too, right? I'm supposed to have it. I got to have it. Something's wrong with me if I don't have it. And so we kill ourselves trying to have it, and you still don't have it, right? So what I'm really saying is one of the things, and I'm working on a model, that we really have to do is start figuring out why we need single people in a nation, right? Because too many people are just planning to figure out, how can I just be alone and lonely and just live this out? That's not right. That's not community. There really is some person, and sometimes it's not even a child, sometimes it's other adults, right, who need this function, right? Because also, to reproduce is one level of commitment to community. And to reproduce people is one function. To reproduce ideas is another function. To reproduce institution is another function, right? So we all should be part of reproduction. But you don't all reproduce people.
Ashe.
This
Yes.
is an invitation to elders too, from being in the space, in rooms where elders have come to show up for young people. There are two things, and this is an invitation. Elders also have to do their work, because although their position in spaces are really powerful, without doing the work, they can perpetuate harm on young people. And I always think about something that Elder said, is that a truth liberated from the inside out is always better than a truth beaten from the outside in. And what I've seen in a lot of spaces is elders using their experience to beat a truth from the outside because they don't know how to liberate truth from the inside. And so if we show up and we take the responsibility, then we also have to be responsible for ourselves, because I've seen young people be bled on because elders and adults didn't know their wounds were open. And so the invitation is to investigate why you're showing up and how you're showing up, so that you can be of best service to the space and not recreate and perpetuate harmful dichotomies that young people are trying to heal from in the present moment.
Thank you so much for that.
You
Thank
almost answered my question. I'm a granddad, brilliant granddaughter. I get challenged trying to, when she's communicating to me about her issues with her mom, because when she's giving me the details, I'm like, oh my God, you got so much agency that when I was your age, I wasn't even thinking about that. And I'm trying to listen and give her solutions without invalidating where she is, and I wasn't. So how do we communicate? How do I communicate that?
Is her mother your daughter?
Yes.
Okay. You know, the thing I think sometimes we do, I'm sorry. Okay. The thing I think sometimes we do is we skip the children and go to the grandchildren, right? You might need to do more healing work with the daughter, right? And although she's an adult, often what has happened is we're far more excellent in our sight and in our seeing when the grandchildren come. But sometimes we have to double back. And sometimes we have to sit down this 42-year-old, right, who I did not give this kind of excellence to. And all her life, the real issue is trying to figure out, why didn't I get it? But we're too old now to think we're going to say that, right? But that's really the issue. And sometimes I would tell you, treat your daughter the way you treat your granddaughter, right? The same way, literally, like rub her head. Get on the floor and play puzzles with her, the daughter. Because see, if we can heal the wound that we think we're actually healing by just going to the grandchild, Because see, remember, we lead a grandchild with the daughter when we go to the house, right? And healing grown people is a much more difficult thing, right? But not only is it important, not only is it necessary, but when your granddaughter sees that, then what she now understands and what she inherits, right, is the process of healing that my people do. Because I saw my daddy heal my mama. Very, 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 very few young people ever witnessed that.
Oh,
Sure, we have, yes.
I would like to know what happened to respect. I'm 86 years old, and I can remember when they spreaded drugs in 117th Street and 118th, 119th Street. And it was, you could see the drugs with a lot of parents out on the street. And I had a man that was a drug addict. He was swollen, couldn't find veins, and he would go down in the street. But that man told me, he said, you know what? I don't want to see you out here in the street. He said, you see how I'm looking? He says, I don't want that to happen to the young people in the community. And, you know, they always say that they tried to get the young people on drugs. It was not like that all the time. I lived on 117th Street, and we were a community. He would come into the community and try to stop the young people getting involved in drugs. He wasn't a good person because he used to steal off the trucks. And he stole a wedding dress off of the truck. And he said to me, he said, look into your future. He said, get married, have children, raise your children to respect. Now, this man was completely out of it. He would go down in the street and come back up. He was, and he wasn't the only one. But in my time, even though this man was a drug addict, I was raised to respect my elders. I don't see this anymore. I don't see people trying to raise children to respect the elders. It's gone. It's missing. They cuss in front of you. They smoke their weed in front of you. I want to know what happened from the time that I was young until the time this is here. It was a community where I lived. It wasn't good, but I was raised up in it, and I turned out pretty good, I figured. And I got a good education, and I raised my children to have a good education, but I always demanded respect. There's no respect anymore. What happened to it? Why isn't somebody trying to raise their children to have respect? But not just the good people, but I mean, he could be a drug addict. He could be a thief. But still, it should be some respect there.
I think for me, as I'm hearing you speak, so one, I want to honor, your story and, just take ownership for how we and those who are part of my generation and even those who were probably in the generations behind me may not always understand what respect means. I do believe that respect shows up in different forms and in different ways. And when she asked the question about where respect has gone, what came to me in a different form was, where's the reverence for life gone, right? Because when we can honor the life and the humanity and the divinity, which is what we've been talking about, and the host of a deity in another, then we can begin to then give respect. But if I have not been taught to see forms of life or to honor forms of life outside of myself, then I don't know how to honor. I don't know how to not withhold, because also what I heard in what you were saying is that I can't say that these things don't show up in certain places. I think that certain youth have learned to shield and hide what they're doing in the presence of others. So then it does bring me back to the question of, then how do I see the elder? How do I see the life, the livelihood in the elder, so that then I can honor the life that is there?
Amen. Ashe. Yes, Sister Arlene. I'm sorry, did anybody else want to address that before we go to the next question?
I was just going to add on also what happens when they've never experienced it for themselves, right? We're trying to, what happens when they don't experience it for themselves? And I think that there's been a breakdown, right? I don't want us to hold all of this as like personal responsibility without giving account to the conditions that have also helped to co-create some of the reality that we're experiencing. I think about this Meek Mill song, and it goes like, it's nobody wants to lose, right? He's like, nobody want to wake up in the morning, go to jail. Nobody want to wake up and be a killer. Nobody, like, that's not what, I don't come into the world wanting to do that. Right? But there are some conditions that have co-created a reality in which I've learned to, young people or the community has learned to respond to. And some of that has been a breakdown in the presence of elders, right? Like millennials have moved away from family and community, and they are living in places where young people aren't even exposed to elders. Right? And because of individualism, and we're no longer in community and in the collective, right? And so literally I have young people who, because their grandmother is 45, right? And like, that's the oldest person that they know. But like, I think that like we have to consider the conditions that have also created the reality in which we are living. But we are trying to do the work to restore that, right? To infuse those values of sight and seeing and respect. And that's why we're trying to shift cultures at school, right? Within the community and at home, so young people get to be back in the practice of this, and how to revere life, right? And not just adult, like human life. Right, because this is a conversation we keep having about like human to human, as if it's not also a reflection of the deterioration and reverence for earth, right, and animals and the elements, right? We don't respect the air and the water and the earth, right? And so of course we don't. There's a lack of respect that we have for humanity. Right, for the humankind. And so I just want to lift that up because I think that it's part of a larger conversation. I think too often we as a community hold personal liability when we are living within the constructs and systems, right, that have contributed to these realities in which we're trying to survive.
Thank you so much for that. I didn't even look at the clock. We're running out of time. Quickly, this last question, and if we can end this as soon as possible because we have another session starting in 15 minutes. Thank you.
I just want to thank you all. Okay, this, oh, I can't get up there. I don't know what to do. All right, let me bring it to Okay, thank you. Okay. I want to thank you all because this has been awakening, okay? There's something that you said last year, Dr. Black, that has impacted me, that I have been working on and continuously will work on and applying it to my life. And as I'm applying it to my life, I'm instilling it into others so that we can work on. And it's, you said, we have to learn how to communicate with each other yet again. But in order to do that, we have to be able to listen and to hear and listen. And we also have to learn each other's language. When I first heard you say language, I said, oh yeah, I want to learn Spanish, English, da, 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 da. But that's not what you were talking about. You were talking about, as we are talking with one another, it's the words that we use. We can be on the same page, but using different words. And because I may say a word that you're not familiar with hearing and what we are talking about and agreeing with, one would assume that maybe I'm putting you down. No, I'm not putting you down. We're on the same page, but you're not accustomed to my word. So therefore, if you don't understand, I'm going to help you understand, but we have to still learn to hear and listen, and it takes time. So I want to thank you for that, and that's where we are now. We have to continue to learn how to communicate, listen, and learn, and nobody is right, so it's going to take time. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Come on, let's give God some praise for this amazing, amazing panel. Amen. All right, now I don't know which one said, our sister, you said you weren't a doctor, but I'm going to make everybody doctors. Let's give God some praise for Dr. Daniel Black and Drs. Ashley Thomas and Ashley Ellis. Come on, let's give God some praise in this house. Amen. This is prophecy time. This is prophecy time. Amen. Thank you so much. We just want to remind you there are still tickets available, but you have to go to the office if you want to get tickets available for the suite this evening. There's no tickets left available online. So if you need tickets for this evening's presentation, you can go back to the fiscal office in the back. And also, you have a chance to just have a few minutes break and come back at 3:30 for our next. Oh, no, it's going to be across the street in the Family Life Center. I'm sorry. Yes, right across the street in the Family Life Center at 3:30 p.m. That's what you were trying to remind me of? Thank you so much. Absolutely. God bless you, everyone. See you in a few minutes.